Hello, welcome back to Project Kermit. We're nearly there, very nearly there. The main task ahead is to sort out the dashboard, but first, as many of you pointed out, there's been a bit of a cock-up. Many people in the comment section to the last Kermit episode told me that this fog lamp is in the wrong place, and they're absolutely right, it is in the wrong place. I've since looked up the regulations, which of course I should have done before mounting the fog light. It just didn't occur to me. What happened was I put the number plate back in the exact place it came from and then put these lamps just somewhere that looked appropriate. But I was wrong. So as far as I can tell, the relevant regulations are the Road Vehicles Lighting Regulations 1989, which doesn't seem to have been superseded. Again, let me know if it has. Schedule 11, rear of the vehicle, fog lamps. And it says they have to be red, so I got that bit right. And if you've just got one fog lamp, it needs to be in the centre or the off side. This is on the near side. Other regulations are that the light needs to be more than 250mm off the ground, which is there, but less than a metre, which is there. We got that bit right. We're about 900 there. And it has to be more than 100mm from a brake light. So no problem there. Now what I could do to bring it in line with the regulations is just fit another lamp. So if I got another one of these fog lamps and I put it on this side, that would comply. But it would have to be at this level. I couldn't put it up there because that would be more than a metre up. And if I put it here, there's nowhere to put a number plate. The number plate sits really nicely in there. So what I'm going to do instead is just swap everything over. So I'm going to put the number plate and number plate light there, and the reversing light and the fog light there. Right, well after all that, we're back where we started. Except now we comply. I do hate doing things twice, I really do. Anyway, let's move on. I'm going to sort out the ducting for the heater next. Most of the system is in place. Now remember, the air comes in here. The air is picked up by the blower that sits inside the wing here. Then it's chucked through here into this heat exchanger, which is basically just a small version of the main radiator. and the cold air is forced through that, comes out as hot air through this hole into the cab. What I need to make up is some ducting to get it from this rectangular aperture up to the demisters. There's one here on one on the other side, and also down into the rest of the cab. As I mentioned before, I got hold of some of the accessory kits for the Chinese diesel heaters, just because they're nice and cheap and you get loads of bits. I also got this, which is going to be a diverter. So you see there's a flap valve in there, and I can send the air up or down. These are the original demister hoses, and they'll go back on, but obviously I've got to step up from this little size up to this. I've also got to get from that rectangular hole where it goes through the bulkhead to a round one, and I'm going to use this adapter. This isn't an ideal shape, obviously, because this is round and that's rectangular. I did find a better shape adapter flange, I suppose you'd call it, on eBay, but it was 3D printed, and the material, I think, would have gone soft at the temperatures involved. So just be aware of that if you're picking out bits for a similar system. Okay, then that's going to tuck in. So in there. Just to give you an idea. It's lacking mounting holes. There's only two on it at the moment, one there and one there, and they're too far apart for where I want to put it in the cab. So I'll get some kind of plate, put the holes in the right place, and that can sit securely in the middle of what's going to become the dash. The other issue is that when I put these together, that space there is too big. I need this one to sit closer to this one so I can get that, have room to put a shelf in. And I can do that just by trimming these down. I think we've got a fair bit. And also this one here, I'm going to sand it so that this flat bit becomes an angle. And that'll mean that this adapter sat on the top of it will shift backwards and come downwards. Let's put two mounting points are existing on this, can attach to the plate. This one will go through the plate into the bulkhead, this top one. That one just attaches to the plate, but then gives two more mounting points to go onto the bulkhead. Okay. So now we've got that bit sorted. The next challenge, of course, is to join this little diddy pipe to this huge pipe here. So these things are sold for dust extraction, and you basically just chop it down to get the required adaptation, and that's what I'm going to do. That should now be the same size as that. Yes, it is. Good. Now we can get on with the dashboard proper. Proper dashboard. We're out here in the yard looking for some material to make the dashboard from. Don't worry about this horse box, by the way. You'll be seeing plenty of that in due course. For now, though, we need some sheet material. I want something that's industrial, but not too hardcore. Something that's rustic, but not too homemade. I do have some nice sheets of oak, but I thought that would be just a bit twee for a Land Rover. For a classic sports car, yeah, that'd be spot on, but not for the Land Rover. And not checker plate. I don't think that's not right either. I've got some of this thick aluminium sheet. Might be a contender. But I think I'm going to go with some flooring. I reckon this stuff here, this is what I'm going to try and use. This is the flooring from the old telecoms truck. It's plywood, but it's faced, it's phenolic plywood. It's the sort of stuff you see on the Eiffel Williams trailers and things like that. I'll show you a close-up of an off-truck. There's the reverse side. There's the face side. This particular bit's filthy and scratched and everything. You'll have to imagine it cleaned up somewhat. But you can see it's got a textured surface, which I quite like. I think that's a bit nicer. Well, not nicer. It's just I think it's better for this application than just plain plywood. So I've got loads of normal plywood with the wood grain that you'd expect. But I've just got a feeling that this sort of non-slip surface, this engineered surface on top of the plywood, I think that's going to look quite good. Well, if it doesn't, we'll just try again with something else. Here we go then. This is what I've salvaged as usable, although I must admit now they're in direct sunlight, usable, it's not the first word that springs to mind. Obviously that's going to take ages to dry now. In the meantime we can do some prototyping with the hardboard. I'm going to start with this bit because that's the bit I've got the clearest idea of what I want to do. So if I just cut a piece of that plywood and mounted it on the binnacle bracket here, it would be like that, and the clocks would be vertical, which is going to make them hard to read. So on the standard binnacle they're recessed at an angle. So what I'm thinking is to move the whole thing back, angle it all back. Instead of recessing the clocks, I'm going to move the whole thing. I think what I'll also do is make the plywood slightly bigger than this bracket. So we've got the edge of the plywood coming out just a tad, and with it leaning back up to probably up to as much as there. Okay, let's do it. I'll get this out. There, moment of truth coming up. We'll see if I guess the right angle or not. Perfect. Phew. So I'll have to make up some little L bracket to actually hold the plywood in place, but that's going to work. That's exactly the angle I was after. So what I want to do now is drill some holes in the hardboard and poke the clocks through, and just make sure that they're going to be in the right spot before we hack into that plywood. Times 3. There. So that looks a bit messy, but that's actually, the clock's laid out proportionally correct. It means they both start that far in. Go there, and then those two go there and there. And it'll all look nice and even then. I've just got to decide where to put the light. What I'm going to do is, instead of drilling out this one, I'll make another hardboard template and drill that out. And then we've got this one as the master, as it were, just in case there's any cock-ups or if I want to change the layout. Oops, on the end. Good, that's one big chunk of thinking done. So relatively easy to make this for real now in the plywood, if we can find a nice section of it. And we can move on to thinking about, so all the rest of the lights and the switches are going to go here. What I like about this setup as well is it means that the temperature gauge is front and centre. And that's, with a diesel engine, that's the most important gauge, I always think. Now initially, of course, when I started thinking about making my own dashboard, I was planning to have all the clocks. Have a oil pressure gauge and a boost gauge and everything else, but I think this is it. This is all I need. For the rest of the dash, I'm going to carry on trying to keep it as simple as possible. And what I've got in mind at the moment is just to have a long shelf, so a bit like that, but continuing all the way to the end. And this will do, at least as a template. Get the end a bit more. I'm quite happy with this shelf. I think that's going to work. I may even use this plywood because this is only, what's that, 6mm ply. It allows room to operate the vents. Whereas a thicker bit of ply, you probably only get down to about there. So that's good as a template, or perhaps as the finished thing. And then to go on the front here, I'm going to use some of that flooring ply, the phenolic stuff. And my plan is to mill a slot in it that will engage on here, and I'll angle it so that it's a similar or same angle to the clocks. So it will come down like that. Basically it's going to look a bit like this. So here's the top edge of it, which will be about 20mm over here, so there'll be a little bit of a lip on the shelf to stop things falling off and to neaten it up and brace it all. Then we come down 200mm, should be about there. So it comes over there. I'm going to have to cut a hole for this big red knob. I was hoping to change the knob, but can you hear it clicks? That clicking mechanism is built into the knob, not into the actual flap valve. So instead I'm just going to cut a big round hole in the panel. So it's going to come along like that, and then I'll kick it up there, and then I'll kick it up there, and then we'll return it. So this bit, I'm not going to make a template, I'm just going to go for it and cut it out of some of that flooring ply. It's where the plywood looks worse every time I look at it. But none of this is going to be usable. That phenolic facing is just gone from the whole of the middle part of the plywood. But up here, this is the best section. So I'm going to try and make the long board out of from there. And then where the speedo and the other clocks are going to go, I can use some of that. Yeah, that bit there is actually, I was going to say, quite good. It's quite good compared to the rest. Nice. This is what we've got to accommodate on this part of the dash. So I'm going to have the 4 toggle switches for, you can see those lights, the wipers, the heater, the lights, the ignition key, the go button and the glow plugs. Big red knob's going to come through there, but I'm going to do something about, well, we'll get to that. These lights have got enough depth to them to go through the board, but nothing else does. So that on here, for instance, see the threaded section, there's a lot less of that than there is thickness of this board. So I've let myself in for quite a lot of woodworking I'm going to have to recess the backs so that they poke through, basically. So that means a trip to Woodworking Corner. The big panel is now ready for some kind of varnish. We need to make this one out of plywood now. The only difference I'm going to make from this prototype is to move the battery lamp. It's slightly obscured by the indicator, so I just want to go that way a bit. Other than that, the placement of the clocks themselves I'm really happy with. That's, yeah, perfect. I've got here some wood dye, some spirit-based wood dye and some board linseed oil. This is an experiment. Mainly what I want to do is get some stain into the edges, but it'll also I just want to, well, not really push it up. I want to do something to it, so I'm just going to mix this half and half in here. I want to add a sheen to it basically and make it look more consistent, but also dye the edges. Here's an offcut. Let's test this idea out. Yeah, that's going to work a treat. So I'm just going to paint it all on and then wipe most of it off, I think. That's the idea. That's the effect I was after, so I'm happy with that. And I might do the edges again, but we'll see. We'll let that dry. Good, that's that then. Now we've got the plywood sorted out, we need some way of attaching it to the actual vehicle. I've just found these pieces of steel that were on a bit of firewood that I was processing, and I think these will be perfect for making the brackets out of. For one, they're galvanised, so I won't have to paint them, and for two, they've already got this profile in them which will make them stiff. So far so good. I now need 3 more brackets to finish off. 2 will attach this to the shelf, so a little diddy bracket going somewhere about there and one there, and then a bigger funny shaped bracket to attach to the bottom of this section. So I'm trying to plan ahead here and make it easy to get this board off so I can get to the back of it and get to all the switches and everything. Out there on the inside of the board. So cut it there, bend it there. That's the correct shape we need. And I'm going to drill some holes, one there, and then one there, one there. we've got holes in there for, that's the demister, that one's for the USB charger, which I'll try and find. So that goes on there. So we've got the little brackets in for it. It's in. Now that's about to be changed, so don't worry about that, but the rest of it, I think that looks quite smart. You know, sort of rustic way. I'm happy with that part of the dash. Now we need now we need to do this. Excellent. These two need to be sat a bit deeper, but they're all working. Blue light on there for main beam. Let's see if that switches correctly. Good, so that's working. Let's try the glow plug. So that should, yeah, glow plug is lit up. What was the other one? So oil pressure, so that should light up. Oh no, we've got nothing. So that one's that. There we go, oil pressure functioning. Okay, so these two lights need to sit deeper in. Other than that, it's all good. Time for the new speedo cable to go in, and I think this will be the last thing to go in the back of the dashboard. That'd be nice. There's the other end of the speedo. That should just clip in to the back of the clock here. Yeah. Now, the last thing I need to do here is to make a little bracket just to attach that bit there to that bit there. Ages ago now, when I was working on the rear tub and I wanted to reinforce it, I ripped down a load of aluminium in the table saw, and this little section is what's left over. But it's a handy profile. So I'll just cut a little diddy bit out, and that will be our bracket. So if we get that in there first. So I flip it this way round. leave it, there we go, it goes in there. There we go, got it. Okay, over to the other side, and we've got to put in the trip counter into the side there. The last thing to do with the dashboard, and probably last thing to do in the cab for now at least, is to enclose these wires somehow. I've been to the scrap pile and dug out some aluminium angle. So I'm thinking if I put that there, and then we've got the there's a metal bracket here holding this lot together, so we can attach to that. Which will be then is so we just need a little infill piece there, but that's absolutely perfect. Been thinking about how to attach this piece to this piece here to the bit of angle, and I could adapt some of these Z brackets, chop them down and open them up. But if I do that, it'll only attach in a few places, and you've got the potential for the plywood I'm going to use instead of this hardboard to sort of be a bit wibbly looking. What I've decided to do is use a batten of wood, which will sit inside here, sit on this little tiny shelf and go right across, and then I can, if I shape it so that we're at the right angle, I can screw into it from the front and screw into it from the underneath, and that will provide a nice consistent straight edge. Cut a section of the batten down. I'll probably have to notch out a bit for this little fuse box. We'll see. Yeah, just a... So the plywood is going to be slightly thicker than this hardboard. I want it to sit, yeah, just like that. So it sits positively on there. There we are, that's 2 decent coats of black paint on that, and we're ready to fit. Well, I think it came out right in the end. Excellent, with that finished, that's the whole dash done. It's all there, it all works. I'm actually really happy with that. It took way longer than I was expecting it to, but I could say that about just about everything. These are the door tops that came with the doors that I've already fitted, and these are military door tops. They're quite different to standard ones. The most obvious difference is they got a slanty glass instead of straight. The main difference is that they're entirely made of aluminium, unlike the standard ones which are steel and dissolve away before your eyes. They're also much better made, and they've got a decent locking mechanism there. So they're not going to need much, these. I'm going to clean them up and paint them. I will try and dismantle them just to get the glass out, make it easier to paint. But they don't really need any actual remedial work at all. Just to clean and paint. While I'm painting things, I'll sort these out as well. So these are little shields that go at the back of the pickup bed here and just cover up the wiring. Yeah, that's glued in. That's staying in. Yeah, we'll just sand it. Well, despite the fact it got down well below freezing last night, the paint survived absolutely fine, which is nice. I didn't fancy doing all this again. That's the last bit of spraying, I think. So remember in the last episode I got the doors to fit really quite nicely, but of course once I put the door tops on, there might be some more fiddling involved. That's better than I thought it was going to be. What's weird about this one is it fits nicely all the way round except for here, where you can see we've got a gap, a substantial gap here, going down to nothing there. I can't really figure that one because the gap down here looks fine. It's as if this bit here, this part of the windscreen is too close, but that's dictated by the roof, and then the roof is attached to the rear of the cab here. It's all, there's no moving any of that. Yeah. Fixed it. If you've ever owned a Land Rover and you've tried to use it for anything practical, you'd have noticed immediately that there are no tie-down points in the back here. Nothing. There's these little hooks externally, but even these aren't really tie-down points. They're just there to, well, they're intended to hold down the canvas tilt. But in Loadbay, there's nothing at all. I was trawling eBay one day and found this one. So this was somebody who was doing a some kind of conversion on a Mercedes Sprinter, and these were basically all the tie down points from the back of the Sprinter. I don't know what he was converting it into, but obviously didn't have any need for these anymore. So on the Sprinter, I'm guessing it had maybe a wooden floor, or maybe these just sit into the floor, but it had these wells, spacer blocks, none of which I'm going to use. Dome washers, I don't think they're useful either. But the actual tie down points, they're really nice quality. And what I've also got is some fittings here, which are a bit like the seatbelt fittings, in that they've got a shoulder on them, which should mean that I can do that and then tighten that down there and still have a little bit of movement in this. Do this badge first. Try and cover up as many of these as possible. Oh, if you're wondering why I put the lights way over there instead of spacing them out nicely like I did previously, I wanted to leave room for a swing away wheel carrier, which I might fit at some point. So it's just to allow clearance here, really. Alright, let's see what we got. There we go. Doesn't really need a Land Rover badge, it's pretty obvious what it is. But like I said, it does cover up some of those holes. Wash on the inside. I've run out of nylocks for the bolts, but I've got hundreds of these normal M8s, so I'm just double nutting it and clamping the nuts together, which will do the same thing. Cool. That's that. So that's all the work at in the load bed done. Last few times I've started the engine, it's been reluctant to start, which is really unusual for a 200 TDI. And then when it does run, it runs okay for a bit and then slowly gets weaker and then just stalls. Now it makes loads of smoke. Enough smoke that I started thinking that something was terribly wrong with the turbo was my first suspect. There might still be something wrong with the turbo, I don't know, but I'm thinking that it's air in the fuel. The reason I'm thinking that is because when I bleed the bleed screw at the top of the fuel filter, loads of froth comes out, and it will then run again, but I can never get just diesel to come out there without it being loads of froth. So it's sucking in air somewhere before that filter, and if it's air coming in, it's got to be before the lift pump as well, or in the lift pump. That's my number one suspect, the lift pump, because the whole point of these fuel lines that I made is that it's just one run all the way to the tank. So I'm thinking it's the fuel pump. It turned up today in the dreaded blue box, so I'm not expecting this to last for that long, although it does have a 2-year warranty on it, so I shall hold them to that. I have to say though, first impressions are pretty good. It looks the part. That's a pumpy noise. With both levers. So we shall give it a shot. I've also ordered the 5mm spacer kit, and what that does, it's just a piece of metal that I could have made one. It's just a piece of metal. It's the same shape as this, same shape as a gasket, but it just pushes the lift pump at 5mm away from the engine block. And that's a modification recommended by Richard at Glencoyne Engineering, and I'd take his word on it. As someone who's an invaluable resource actually, Glencoyne Engineering website if you're doing 200 or 300 TDI conversions into old Land Rovers. So that won't arrive until next week, so I'm going to fit this anyway as it is, see if we can get back up and running again. Well, there's the one that came out. Let's put this on and see what's what. Okay. Wow, that's very disappointing. That's exactly the same symptoms as I was having before. Exactly the same. So it wasn't the fuel pump. There's air being gulped in somewhere. That is a real bummer. I had managed to convince myself that the problem was a fuel pump. Now I'm back to wondering what the hell it could be. Maybe that's it, because that olive doesn't look great. If there was any hole in this tube, see, above the level of the diesel, then that would explain it. It looks fine. It looks really good, actually. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just that olive. It is loose. Let's see if I got one that fits. Yeah. It should fit on there. So let's try and get this one off. Challenge is to get through the olive without making a flat spot on the pipe. That's it. That's that one off. Yeah, that's not going on now. I found the issue. This connector here is a different thread pattern to what I've been screwing onto it. So it was never going to do up properly. Because I've just found this one which screws into these fittings far more positively. So that's the correct thread profile, that's not. If I can get that in there, then we're away. We found an actual definite problem. So that's a good thing. Right, moment of truth. Again. So once again I'm going to start it up, open this bleed screw, and maybe this time we'll just have diesel coming out of here instead of bubbles. I should point out there is a tray under the vehicle, so this isn't all just going on the floor. That's to be expected because we did let a load of air into the line back of the tank there. So let's crank it over again. Not happy, is it? I can't figure out where the air is coming from. I just really can't. That's got me stumped. I'm just gonna have to leave it there for tonight. It's dark. It's really, really cold. I'm all out of inspiration. After finding that issue on the tank and sorting that out with the unions on the pickup, I really expected it to be sorted then, and it wasn't, and I just had to walk away for a couple of days. You can just get too close to a problem and you don't have any chance of sorting it out at that point. During that time it occurred to me that maybe, just maybe, with all this messing around with the fuel system, I might have just run out of fuel. So I headed off on the motorbike and I got a jerry can of diesel. Let's try that. It might be as simple as that. I did notice a problem here on this little leak-off pipe. That's deteriorated and it's leaking just there. So we ordered up some replacement tubing for that, and I will sort that out. But that is on the return line, so I can't see that making any difference to the air buildup that's here in the fuel filter, because this is just on what's going into the injection pump. Not smoking now, which is... It might have been it. So that was that. I got so focused on sorting out problems with the fuel system, I forgot the very most basic thing of all. Keep some fuel in the tank. I'm going to fit these next. These are mud shields, and these go on the inner wings and just deflect some of the road fill from going straight into the engine bay. I'm going to take the wheels off as well, and that'll give me a chance to torque up the wheel spacers. I'm going to put an M10 and an M8 on these bolts, and together they'll act as spacers just to bring the shield away from the footwell just a bit. So it's just a bit less likely that mud will get trapped. original bracket has corroded away. So I cut a new one, which I'll fix into the top of the wing, and it will pick up on these 3 holes. Next job is to torque up these wheel spacers, and I'm going to do those to the same tightness as the wheel nuts. So that's 90 to 100 foot-pounds if I remember correctly. And the reason I'm putting the Loctite on there, the thread locker, is because once this is all put together, you can't see these nuts, unlike the wheel nuts, which obviously you can inspect on a daily basis, whatever you like. These ones are hidden away. The next job is to tighten up the suspension bolts. Now when I fitted the axles, I deliberately left the suspension bolts loose all the way around because they've got to be tightened up when the suspension is at its midpoint, and I figured that'd be easier to do, well, when the vehicle's all built up rather than just a bare rolling chassis, which it was at the time. Now in the service manual, it does have a measurement for the midpoint of the suspension, but of course that doesn't apply to Kermit because I fitted parabolic springs. So they have a bigger range than the usual leaf springs, the standard leaf springs. So we'll have to find out what the extremes of that range are and then work out the midpoint. We're off the axle stands, back on the ground, and I suspect this is the level at which I want to tighten up the bolts, but I'm going to try and work it out anyway. So I'm going to measure the gap between the axle and the suspension bump stop. This is the gap here between, this is the axle, top of the axle, and this is the rubber bump stop. That's 78 on this side, it's about 76 on the other side. Now to see how much travel I've got in the suspension, I'm going to lift up this corner here and let the wheel hang down. So you can see I'm increasing that gap. Yeah, the wheel's off the ground now, so that's a fair amount of travel. It's not going to do much more than that in usual everyday life. I'm not bothered about getting underneath it without an axle stand because if the jack gives up, it can't go very far. The axle stand wouldn't do anything anyway because the axle's down there. Down there. So according to my calculations, we need the front of this lifting a little bit. So the actual midpoint of travel is about 15 mil up from where it's resting at the moment. That shouldn't take much at all. And again, this is only relevant to Kermit because of the parabolic springs on there. Standard Land Rover would be, you could just go by the manual. That's probably about there. Just got to make sure it stays there. Yeah, this jack will lower over time, so I'm just going to measure this measurement because it's more convenient. 4/6/8. So 4/6/8 to the bottom of that. Back of the spring is slightly more interesting. So here at the back of the spring, the bit I want to show you is that here, this part of the shackle, this side of the shackle, this is threaded, and the reason that's important is because this bolt has to be torqued into this shackle first. That has to be set to the same tightness as I did the front, and then the nut goes on, and then that's also torqued up. So this is something that there's quite a bit of debate about on the forums, which is odd because it's very specifically laid out in the manual that you torque up the bolt and then you put the nut on and torque that up. The other side on. Ooh, this is going to be tricky. It's got the exhaust is riding away here, so that might have to come off. And I'm going to turn the truck around and we'll do the back. I've got a feeling we might have to load the back to get it to the right height, but we'll see. Same deal at the back here then. I'm going to lift the chassis. I'll do it on the tow hitch this time. Okay, the wheels are just coming off the ground there. Let's see what we've got. 238. Yeah, I'm going to have to squidge it down this time. I've got to push the suspension down by 73mm, so about 3 inches. And that's the midpoint then, and then I can do up the bolts. I'm going to use that, so we'll either push the Land Rover down or push the building up. Hopefully the former. Good. Next up then is to torque up the wheel spacers and wheels on the back. I'll take the wheels off and I'll lock the brakes again like I did before because that worked rather well. That's good. That's that all done. I've been out for a couple of drives so far, just short little jaunts, but before I go any further I'm going to take Kermit for an actual MOT. Now of course Kermit, by virtue of being over 40 years old, doesn't technically need an MOT, but I'm going to get one anyway, just for the peace of mind of having a second opinion. So as ever, before going to an MOT, I've downloaded the MOT checklist from the government website, and with Katie's help I've just been through all the items that are on the checklist here. We found a couple of things, There was some play in the steering which turned out to be a loose pinch bolt. So I'm glad I found that. And the last thing that I'm going to do before taking it for an MOT, which is tomorrow afternoon, I've got to sort out the exhaust. Now the exhaust, it's rubbing on the suspension bolt. A suspension bolt that wasn't there when I built the exhaust. This is the trouble of, yeah, I'll show you. Suspension bolt here is the issue. The nut on the end of this nut and bolt rubs against the exhaust. It makes a rattling noise, but apart from anything else, it's going to wear its way through the exhaust in next to no time. So I'm going to take the downpipe off here and just extend it a tad to give us some clearance. There, you can see that's thicker on one side than the other, and this wider side is going to go here on this side of the exhaust, and the low side on this side, and that'll push the problem area away from the suspension. Obviously just complete guesstimates here. Let's offer it up and see how it looks. Get my whole hand in there now. Much better. Excellent. So I'll take that off again and weld it up properly, tidy up the welds, bit of spray paint, and we'll be done. The exhaust is back on. It's time. I've checked and checked and checked everything I can think of. Off for the MOT. Well, that was an anticlimax. I got all the way to the MOT test centre and the guy said, oh, where's the VIN, mate? Of course Kermit is pre-VIN, but we couldn't find the chassis number on the domains of the chassis, and I didn't have the logbook on me, and so he needed the registration number and the chassis number in order to log it onto the computer to do an MOT. So I've come home empty-handed. How frustrating. The next MOT slot is in a week's time. The frustrating thing is the chassis numbers are on the dumb irons, we just couldn't find them. I was there scraping away. I remember them being still visible when we got back from dipping it in zinc, so when I came back from the galvanizers the numbers were still visible, but couldn't find them. So maybe with a wire brush and angle grinder I can take off enough paint, because I've just put layers and layers of paint on the front dam irons. There's no sign of the numbers at the moment, but they are there somewhere. Just filmed that bit to camera and I was thinking to myself, but where is, surely there's a chassis number other than just on the chassis on a Series 3. And I figured it out, I've remembered, and I even know where it is. Either way. Of course on this Series 3 the number is on the front panel, and of course on Kermit I changed the front panel. Here's the original. I bet you it's still on it. Yes. I feel such an idiot. This is it here, this plate. Under these leaves. That's what the guy needed. I went through everything I could think of on the MOT list except the thing that would enable me to have an MOT in the first place. Anyway, I'm going to stop grizzling about it. Well, my door seals turned up. In the end I went for some dirt cheap Defender door seals. These are Britpop and it cost 30 quid for a set, and I figured even if they didn't fit directly I could modify them to fit at that price. And funny thing is that they just went straight on. I've already done the passenger side. I'm going to do the driver's side now. But it fits fairly well. Just knocking it in with a mallet. That's it, ready for another shot of the MOT. Now that's a few days away, which gives us time to have a test drive, a proper test drive. I've been out in it, but not more than a mile or two from home so far. But let's go and see Mark. Let's go and see the man who gave me Kermit all those years ago and see what he makes of the finished article. If all is still well by the time we get to Mark's, I might even carry on going to see Grandad. I think that would round out the series nicely. So join me for those adventures in what will probably be the final episode of Project Kermit. Cheers for now.